Dear Ida and Louise, the role of asking questions is paramount to Judaism. We have a love of questioning, and it is core to our understanding of Jewish practice. And so at Temple Micah, our bat mitzvah, our b'nai mitzvah ritual is not complete without both of you asking a question. So each of you has posed a question to me, and my sermon is a response to each of you in letter form. Let's begin. Louise, you're up first. You've asked me, how would Judaism change if it was the majority, if it was the religion of the majority instead of the minority? It was the majority religion instead of the minority one. It's a good thought experiment. What would be different? We might imagine being invited to a Hanukkah concert at the elementary school where they sing just one Christmas song to make sure everyone's represented. Maybe at that same elementary school, letters are sent home to Jewish parents to explain strange springtime rituals, like running around collecting eggs instead of eating matzah and charoset. At that school, Sukkot is the standard week off in the fall, Passover is a week off in the spring, and everything gets quiet around sundown Friday. Sundays, just a regular day. There is a place where this is true, of course, and that is Israel. The rhythms of the time there are Jewish, the language Jewish, the national holidays are Jewish, and the civic ceremonies are infused with Jewish ritual. It's an experiment in being a majority. But Lulu, you're asking a much larger question. What if this was true all over the world? The United States, no longer a Christian nation, but a country filled with Jews. Instead of 7.5 million of us, there would be more than 200 million, just in America. So what would change, we ask? Would anti-Semitism go away? Or would it perhaps never have existed at all? With no anti-Semitism, there's no Holocaust, no pogrom, no Crusader massacres, no Inquisition, perhaps even no exile from the land of Israel, no destruction of the temple. This sounds like a dream. Jewish children growing up without the fear of persecution, growing up without the trauma that lives in our bones and collective memory. And not just that. There are certainly Jewish teachings and ideas that I think the world would significantly benefit from if they were moved from the margins to the center. For example, the laws of justice, which mandate impartiality, require the dignity of all defendants, requires that the rich and poor are treated equally in the courtroom. It's a system of legal interpretation that protects life, all but making illegal the death penalty. And certainly, I would like to see a world filled with the Jewish idea that each person's innate dignity, which is derived from the spark of the divine within each of them, is part of our day-to-day discourse. And I guess, since we're dreaming, if Jews were a majority, tzedakah, a required act of giving and caretaking, would replace other notions of charity. We would not give simply when or because our hearts felt like it. Instead, we would protect society's most vulnerable because we are mandated to by Torah, and because it is the right thing to do. And we'd follow other of Torah's laws. We'd pay people what they are owed when they are owed it. We'd have a system in place to forgive debts, and immigrants would be welcomed all over the world because once we had been strangers. I could go on. There's so much of the moral voice of Torah that I think the world needs to hear that would be better at the center, that I believe could or would be part of how societies and governments would operate if Jews were the majority. But I also have to ask myself, what would be lost? What would it mean to engage in our... How would it feel to say at Passover, in every generation there have been enemies who have tried to destroy us, but we have prevailed? It feels different, imagining us being the strong ones, our enemies, not groups or nations, more powerful than us. And the statement instead becomes an expression of might, about our ability to quash rebellion, and not about how we survived, how we developed resiliency of spirit. So on paper, I think, Judaism might not change, at least at its essence, but Jewish identity might. Our relationship to our text might. Our central narrative of Exodus becomes one of a people who descended from slaves and became kings, and not of a people who descended from slaves and therefore decided to throw their lot in with the disadvantaged and struggling. What would it mean to be a light unto the nations when perhaps that light is spread by influence or might and not by inspiration and moral clarity? And I fear, Lulu, that we'd take our Judaism less seriously if we didn't have to work for it or assert our right to practice it. Louise, there is an ease in imagining this alternative reality where Jews are the majority, the least of which is imagining a world where there is less hatred for us, where there is a much greater sense of safety in numbers and acceptance. But I think our lot is different. I think it's to be the proudest, loudest minority that we can be. In the words of Rabbi Leo Beck, the Jews have always been a minority, but a minority is compelled to think. A minority is compelled to think. That is the blessing of its fate. It must always persist in a mental struggle for that consciousness of truth which success and power comfortingly assure to rules and their supporting multitude. The conviction of the many is based on the weight of possession, but the conviction of the few, he says, is expressed through energy of constant searching and finding. And this inner activity becomes central to Judaism, the serenity of a world accepted and complete beyond its reach. So, our job as the minority is to speak truth to power, not because it helps maintain our own power, but simply because it is true. And to be on the side of justice, on the side of the oppressed, to be proud of being Jewish, and to have it be a defining feature in our lives, to fight for our right to live freely, and to fight for that right for other minorities too, and also to be pushed to constantly articulate who we are and what we believe in, to be carriers of an ancient story, to be history's ultimate survivors, and to allow that to endow you with purpose, to be compelled to think and question, which is what being a minority encourages, and a purpose I hope you'll embrace. Your friend, Rabbi Crawley. Letter 2. Dear Ida, you've asked me, at what point do we throw away peace for what we believe in? Ida, I cannot state this strongly enough. Never, never do we throw away peace. I wrote this sentence to myself on October 9th. The peacetime sermon must be peace, and the wartime sermon must be peace. The value of peace, the pursuit of peace, is Judaism's highest ideal. In the words of Mordecai Kaplan, peace is the aim of human life to which all other aims are secondary. The pursuit of peace evokes compassion, which is higher than justice. Peace, he writes, is the divine attribute of perfection and the loftiest ideal of human ethics. And peace combined with truth is the highest purpose of human life. The highest purpose. Our sages, too, write about the central role of peace. Peace is precious, they write, because each generation sought peace. Each built what Torah calls a covenant of life and peace. Great is peace, they say, for peace is to the world as leaven is to dough. We work, it rises in us, and we let it rise in the world. Seek peace and pursue it, we are commanded, in every place. Gadol HaShalom, they teach. Gadol HaShalom, great is peace. So great is peace that every prophet in their time is its advocate. So great is peace that idol worshippers should be left as alone so long as they are at peace. So great is peace that even upon entering a battle, you cry out first for peace. So great is peace that we pray for its presence for both the living and the dead. So great is peace that it is the reward given to the righteous. So great is peace that every blessing ends with it. So great is peace that one can put aside a painful truth in service in peace. So great is peace, they say, that even God's name is shalom, is peace. Peace is the ultimate goal. Always, always, Ida. We never throw away peace. And yet, that does not mean that we don't ever fight, that we don't ever wage war. It does not mean that we do not have the right to protect ourselves. What it does mean is that all of our fights must be done in pursuit of peace. Power for the sake of bringing peace, not power for the sake of bringing more power. Dr. Tal Becker, a scholar and more notably a veteran member of many Israeli peace negotiation teams, said this last week. Power is a force for good in the world, but it is also a recognition that there is evil in the world that needs to be confronted. There isn't a path towards peace that doesn't involve defeating the enemies of peace. He echoes what Kaplan wrote. It is important not only to stress the need for peace, but also to unmask the raving image of hatred. What we must do, Ida, is to fight a just war to defeat the enemies of peace. I never wanted to give this sermon. I have to admit, I do not have a stomach for war. My Judaism is about justice and compassion. My Judaism has always been about that thing I referenced earlier, that each human life is worthy of dignity and protection. And it has created, both in me and society, a deep challenge and chasm, well expressed by scholar Yehuda Kurtzer. He wrote, "The challenge we face is that the dominant moral instincts and biases that define liberal North American Jewry, including an abiding commitment to kindness, compassion, and peace, make it difficult to confront the sad and painful truth that Israel is fighting a just war based on a just cause, and that solidarity with both our fellow Jews and with our values means supporting this war against Hamas, as awful as it will be." And yet he continues, "To argue for the moral necessity of war right now is not a betrayal of our core commitments. Instead, it makes our commitments coherent in an imperfect world. It is precisely the commitment to compassion that helps us understand the villainy that Hamas is committing against both Israel and against the Palestinian people, and that strengthens our resolve to defeat it. Our commitment to compassion should not become an obstacle to seeing that eradicating Hamas is essential to the world we want to create, a world in which the safety and security of both Jews and Palestinians between the river and the sea is intertwined and guaranteed for both. God will go to war for it. So great is peace that we will stomach its fog and its darkness, not just because we have to protect ourselves, but because we have to protect our vision for the world. We have to defeat enemies of truth. We have to defeat merchants of hatred. We have to defend peace. And today, that means letting go in this moment, but never, never forgetting that peace is the goal. That battle, any battle, has to be about walking towards peace. Ida, we must never throw away peace. This is our moral grounding, our ultimate goal, to be on the side of truth and justice and peace. And it also means that war should never be glorified. We should not want this. We should not celebrate it. But in Kurtzer's words, just wars are not just because they are easy or victimless. Just wars are just because they are morally necessary, because pacifism in the face of an unfettered evil is an untenable moral position. We must not be passive in the face of evil. God was not passive in defeating Pharaoh. Haman must die. Today, defeating evil means fighting a war, but it does not mean fighting it unjustly. This too is important for me to say. There are Jewish and international laws that must be obeyed. There are Jewish ethics and mandates that we must hold Israel accountable to. Peace must always be the first choice, must always, whenever we can, be on the side of life. But we must also accept that sometimes that is not possible, that sometimes fighting a war is morally necessary. So we let go of peace in one moment in order to maintain our vision of a world redeemed, a world at peace. And we pray for that ultimate vision of our prophet Micah, where swords are turned into plowshares, and that day we will only study peace because there will be no more need to study war. This is the world I hope you inherit. Your friend, Rabbi Crawley.